Hello again, Yaksamash, and welcome back to Wrench Reads, Trilogy of Morgalla, Diary of a Lonely Demon, number 8. Yeah, number 8. If this is the first Wrench Reads you've watched, click the on-screen annotation appearing right now, go back to the introduction, start there. And as always, a link to this novel is in the description box below. I hope you all are doing very well this Super Bowl Sunday, the all-American holiday. My appetizer is currently cooking on the stove right now, so I figured I had a few minutes. I might as well do another reading. And this is a reading that I'm really excited about because of who we finally get to meet. We finally get to meet John's Mary Sue. We finally get to meet Jasper Davis, who is John's male lead in this book. Why do I call him a Mary Sue? That's what I want to talk about in the introduction today. And of course, any links that I mention will be down below. Jasper Davis is essentially what is known as a Mary Sue. I've seen this used in two different ways, a Mary Sue being a self-insert, for one. I think that's the most common use of the term. But two is this overpowered and ridiculously a god character in play-by-post RP circles. I've seen it used as a god character. But today, in the novel that I'm reading, the character is known as Jasper Davis. In one of the pieces of art that I'm going to link below, it actually shows Jasper saying that this is John Davis as the main character of this novel. And in the earlier iterations of Trilogy of Morgalla, Diary of a Lonely Demon, John Davis was Jasper's name. It wasn't Jasper at all. It was John Davis. But people flipped out because it was obviously a self-insert. John David is the author. John Davis was the main character. So this kind of puts a lot of it into perspective when we start to read the rest of the book. John David is essentially using this book kind of as a self-insert fantasy. And he's, of course, trying to publish it for the funds, for the profit. But we'll see what that actually brings us to when we get into the reading. It's a short-ish reading today, but there's a lot to it. So let's get to it. And again, if you like what I do, rate, comment, subscribe. I do this for you guys and for John, because this is the publicity that he so deserves and desires, is what I'm doing. So, Chapter 3, Jasper Davis. On a planet called Earth, there was a town. It was just a small dot in a large landscape with many people ignorant of the universe around them and of the terror at their back door. Lately the sky was nothing but gray, and all the color seemed to be drained from the town. The mood abysmal and melancholy, a sea of frowns and sneers on all crowds. Nothing could be going wrong today for one young man. He was late for his appointment, but hardly anything could bring him down. A long red nail tapped with impatience on a tabletop. The nail's owner looked at her watch again. She would have left, but she had to get this over with. She didn't look at the waitress who walked up and refilled her coffee cup. She saw him run up to the window suddenly. He smiled and waved at her, and she sighed. Italics. About damn time. On italics. He ran in, and she stood to meet him, but only for a brief moment. He gave her a kiss on her cheek, though it was unwelcome. Hi, sorry I'm late. I've been waiting for 20 minutes, Jazz. Italics. I know, I'm sorry, Mariette. I got you something. They both sat down, and Jasper held up a large, thick envelope holding many papers. I finished it. Finished what? She said, her head resting on her hand. My latest essay. Another draft, anyway. Jasper's smile could not get any bigger. He was so anxious for her to read what he had just finished. I was up half the night finishing it. I hope Mr. Kent likes it. I swear that guy is impossible to please. And this is draft what number again? Mariette's question was filled with contempt for Jasper's craft. Oh, well, I don't know. I lost count. But I think I got it this time. He set the envelope in front of her, but she showed absolutely no interest in it. "Look, Jazz, I just don't care about this, okay?" Mariette said, pushing the envelope back across the table to him. Jasper's smile was gone in an instant. He was confused as to what was happening. "You don't want to read it?" he asked. Mariette was frustrated and becoming angry. "I just don't want this anymore, okay?" she exclaimed. She tried to keep her voice down, but he was making it difficult. "This? You don't want me to write anything else? Damn it, you're getting dumped, you moron." All eyes were on the two of them for a moment, and the coffee house was silent. All emotion was gone from Jasper's face as his eyes clouded. You're dumping me?" "Duh." "Well," he continued, "it was sure an interesting 2.5 dates. I don't have time to go into it in detail." "No detail is necessary," he replied as he gathered his papers and was about to leave. "Well, I got a minute. Let's look at your writing for a moment, if you can call it that." "I thought you liked reading it." "Yeah, I thought it was sweet at first," she said, "that you wanted to be a news guy. Journalist." Italics. Jasper interjected. "Whatever, but I didn't know you sucked at it. You're never going to get a job doing this." You can tell what's italics now, I hope. "What?" he said in disbelief, on the verge of anger at what she was saying. "I'll have you know." "Then there's your car," Mariette interrupted him. "It's a piece of crap, Jazz. And don't get me started on your apartment." There was a honk of the horn, and they both looked out to see a shiny red sports car. A man behind the wheel waved and pointed to his watch. Mariette stood and threw her purse over her shoulder. "Look, there's my ride," she went on. Jasper's jaw dropped again. "Face it, Jazz, you're going nowhere, and I found a man with a future." He should have said something, and he knew it, but he kept his mouth shut. He had every right to yell at her and call her a name, but didn't. As always, he remained silent. She walked out of the coffee shop, and Jasper slouched in the chair. He was helpless, watching the shiny red sports car driving away with tires squealing. The waitress walked by, setting the check down on the table. Section break. He was good at school but hated to go. Too many negative people and too much pointless work. Jasper sat numbly in Mr. Kent's class at the local community college. He was still in shock over the morning's events. Italics. How could I have been so blind? Jasper never thought he would get ensnared in the web spun by a ravenous female. He was just a fly to her, and this particular Black Widow had tossed him aside for bigger game. He didn't see it now, but he was better off. Though the relationship was still in its infancy, Jasper saw it as love. He shouldn't have. That's in the book. He shouldn't have. This was the class that he hated most, not because of its subject matter, but because of the teacher. Mr. Kent seemed to be completely unsatisfied with most people's work and hardly handed out high marks to anyone. Jasper did notice, though, that the two most physically attractive ladies in class often got good grades. He never lingered on such things, though he wasn't the only one who noticed. Mr. Kent was an oddity among the teaching staff at the school. There were other teachers who would wear slacks. Where other teachers would wear slacks, he would wear jeans with holes in them. Other teachers would wear dress shirts. He would wear shirts of the same style, but wrinkled and with the sleeves rolled up. Though he was often told to wear a tie, he simply refused, much to the annoyance of the dean. What hair he had left was gray, and he kept it long and wore it in a ponytail. The teacher overlooked the class. Some of the students did not care much for what he had to say. Jasper Davis was on the edge of his seat, quite anxious. Mr. Kent had collected the latest assignment and was passing back the one he had just graded. "Some of your work was so riveting I couldn't put it down," Mr. Kent said. "I was quite impressed with your latest assignment, for the most part." Jazz let out a sigh and sank a bit more in his chair. His teacher handed him a paper, face down and slightly folded, so that everyone else could not see the grade. It was pointless, though, since Jasper immediately flipped it over to see what his teacher had that his teacher had failed him. A failing grade after all that work. What? Italics. Unitalics. Mr. Kent then looked at the attractive Missy Rider. Let me get this right. Mr. Kent then looked at the attractive Missy Rider. He smiled at her, and she gave him a wink. No period. In this class, people, Mr. Kent continued, we think with compassion and with open minds. As Kent spoke, Jasper flipped through the latest essay that was graded. He was reading the handwritten notes, each a great annoyance. Italics. You gotta be kidding me, on italics. Today we're going to talk about the United Nations, Mr. Kent began his lecture. Its history, impact on the world, and how it is important to all nations on this planet. Jasper could not concentrate, hearing only the title United Nations as the lecture began. His eyes went to the paper he had turned in today, in the large pile on the teacher's desk. He thought about how hard he had worked on that one, too. His heart sank, for it would probably be another failing grade. That's the reading. So I came into this section of the book, initially, really not sure what to expect. I mean, I'd heard, what's the word? The kind of the writing on the wall when it came to this piece, or this part of the piece. Because a lot of folks kind of pull out sections of it, kind of, not necessarily out of context. There really is no good context that you could have for some of this crap. But it really shows kind of the mindset that John has when he's writing these characters. So let's get into my comments. Because this, I'll try to keep my rants down because I've got a couple that could really get me started. Going back to the first part of the section, or first section of this chapter. He's describing the city of something. We don't even know the name of the city as of yet. The mood was abysmal and melancholy, a sea of frowns and sneers on all crowds. This is chapter 3 of a long-ish novel. This shows me that there is not an editor in sight, because it's not even a fraction, or a sentence fragment. It's two fragments glommed together to try to make a complete thought, and there isn't a thought. I mean, I'll read it again, with the sentence before it as well. Lately the sky was nothing but gray, and all color seemed to be drained from the town, implying a cloudy weather. The mood was abysmal and melancholy, a sea of frowns and sneers on all crowds. While I can see where he was trying to go with it, essentially saying that there was a sea of frowns on all crowds in this melancholy mood, it just doesn't sound right. It doesn't flow. There is no decent flow for it here. And then we get to him jumping to Jasper in the middle of that paragraph. Nothing could be going wrong for today for one young man, and we have met our protagonist. And then it shoots over to Mariette, this girl. And we'll get into more of why this is just kind of wrong, and it shows really a couple things about John in a second. About damn time. I mean, the writing here is kind of just spotty at best, but Jasper runs up, kisses her on the cheek. He gave her a kiss on the cheek, though it was unwelcome. That's one thing, and I'll get back to it in a second. I got you something, and Jasper sets his essay in front of Mariette. That's number 2. And this is draft what number again? That's a kind of a 2.5. It's part of number 2. And then the third part comes later on in the section. This entire dialogue between these two characters just brings up one thing in my head. John does not know how to write dialogue between two people who care about each other. If John had actually cared about this girl, the first thing that he would have said to her, aside from "Sorry, I'm late," he would have kissed her and realized. It's fairly obvious. Let's see. He gave her a kiss on the cheek, though it was unwelcome. That implies to me that it was an obvious, unwelcome kiss. Jasper, if he had any sense, would have noticed the change in her mood. He would have noticed that she was uncomfortable with being kissed. And he would have said, maybe, "How was your day? How are you doing?" rather than like, here's my homework, read my homework. I mean, and it's not even a poem. Like, I would have expected to give someone, as I'm a writer, I would have expected to give someone who knows that I'm a writer a nice poem or a short story, maybe starring that character. But this is something that I would do after I'd gotten to know the person. Let's get on to why this is just so terrible after we look at a few more things. Mariette is essentially dumping Jasper. I'm actually going to leave a link to one of Ali's, the Ravenous Females Tumblr page, which comes from a line in this part of the section, as to talking about kind of this, just incredibly feminine, or is that the word? Yeah, this is incredibly sexist, and how someone who's a girl would have actually responded to this, because I'm obviously not a girl. No, not a word. How someone like that would react to it. I think I might link Hana's as well, Hana Bakemono's, because she wrote a fantastic article on how this could have changed. Something else. Sorry, something in my mouth. This is all from Jasper's point of view. This entire scene is from purely Jasper's point of view. I don't care about this. Jasper's smile was gone in an instant. He was confused as to what happened. This is a very one-sided relationship. Jasper doesn't realize that Mariette is unhappy. Jasper doesn't realize that Mariette doesn't want to read his homework. Jasper doesn't even realize the writing on the wall when he's being dumped. This is an incredibly one-sided relationship. And then, and it comes down to exactly just how stupid John is in this regard, talking about dates. Jasper has been on, and it says it right here, well, he continued, it was sure an interesting 2.5 dates. Not 2.5 months, not 2.5 weeks, 2.5 dates. Like coffee shop meetings. And apparently, we don't know how these two met. We don't know if Jasper started coming to see Mariette so she could read his homework or something, or if Jasper actually thought it was a something that actually had some kind of significance between the two of them. But it doesn't make sense in the context of this relationship between the two characters. And I'm getting off topic here. I thought you liked reading it. Yeah, I thought it was sweet at first. You wanted to be a news guy. This shows that Jasper is freaking clueless. At first. So she's been doing this for a while, or at least maybe on one or two of their dates. It shows that she doesn't care about his handwriting, and he doesn't care about his writing, and she doesn't care about his writing, and he doesn't care about her opinions on anything enough to actually realize that she doesn't like it. So, and then Mariette starts bitching about his car, his job, his car, his job, his apartment, and then gets up, leaves, gets in a red sports car with another guy who we assume is rich because he has a sports car, and they drive away. This is essentially John trying to turn Mariette into a gold digger. If you're not familiar with the term, look it up. It's essentially someone who tries to use someone for money. But she's been on 2.5 dates with this guy, with Jasper. If she was expecting money, she wouldn't have gone after Jasper in the first place, because he's a student. He has a dead-end job that we'll get to in a bit. He has a shitty car and a shitty apartment. There's something else behind this, and this is where I'm going to link Hana's fantastic rewrite of this section, because there's more to it than just her being a gold digger. John himself puts the context in there for it. So it really just it's John trying to get us emotionally attached to this character and shooting himself in the foot while trying to do it. So, she leaves the check on the table for Jasper, which honestly, you don't have to be a sexist or a radical feminist to do that to somebody. It just means you're pissed at them, and from what I've seen, Mariette has every right to be. So So even if John tries to paint Jasper as this pitiable character, so far he's only succeeded in painting Jasper into a corner. And plus, and this is something that I didn't mention, Jasper was late to this meeting. If you care about somebody, you make every attempt to be punctual. So either Jasper doesn't care about being on time, or the character cares more about getting his writing done than being with this girl. So, okay, I might be reading too much into it, but honestly, this is ridiculous. And I almost stopped here. I almost stopped at this section when I started to read this book because it was so bad. The next section, the one that I'll get to next week, is Jasper talking to Kent and Mr. Kent. This is the second half of it, and it shows more about how John doesn't understand who he's writing about or what he's writing about. But we'll get there. How could I be so blind? This is in the next section after you get to the school where Jasper says, he was good at school but hated to go, too many negative people and too much pointless work. Jasper, honestly, and we'll get into this in a minute, I don't think John has ever gone to college or actually ever gone to a community college, so he knows what's going on. We'll get to why that is prominent, in my mind at least, here in a second. Jasper starts to complain about being dumped by Mariette. Oh, boo-hoo. And this is something that a lot of your kind of MRA style guys don't seem to understand. You can complain that you got dumped, but don't start to attack the person who dumped you as anything less than a person because they dumped you. You have a right to be upset. You don't have a right to try to besmirch the character of the person that you actually went out with, unless they've actually done something of a infraction against you, in which case, then fine. But Mariette hasn't done anything like that here. So, Jasper never thought he would be ensnared by the web spun by a ravenous female. This style of writing actually bleeds through John's own words. This sounds like something that it didn't actually come from Jasper. It came from John himself. Jasper never thought he would get ensnared in the web spun by a ravenous female. This doesn't actually seem... The writing is out of place here. So, and then later on in that section, he didn't see it now, but he was better off. Though the relationship was still in its infancy, Jasper saw it as love. If this is Jasper's idea of love after 2.5 dates, I have no idea what to say. Because it's clear that Jasper has no idea what love is. And you know what? I'll put up another link where John himself said, "I have never found love, therefore it doesn't exist," or something to that effect. I'll put the link in the below box. And now we get into the class that he hated most because of the teacher, because the teacher never gives him a good mark. And we'll get to why that is not the teacher here in a minute. But Jasper complains that he did notice that the two most physically attractive ladies in the class often got good grades. That's the first section. Mr. Kent was an oddity, wearing very loose, very relaxed fit clothes, untidy button-up shirts, ragged pants. John probably doesn't know this, but community college professors and even professors at universities, like true universities, don't get paid a lot. So it sounds to me like because there's no other side of this argument, it just sounds to me like Mr. Kent is essentially living in his means. And if John, knew any better, if he actually knew anything about colleges, that might have struck him as well. Though he was often told to wear a tie, he simply refused, much to the annoyance of a dean. I don't know of a single dean, either in community colleges or actual state colleges, anywhere in academia, that say this. Wear a tie. You don't have to. A tenured professor can do pretty much anything he or she wants. Wearing ragged clothes, whatever. Because Dr. Kent is he's portrayed as old, graying hair, we can assume that he has probably got tenure at this community college. It doesn't take as much to get tenure at a community college than as a state college, but because he's been here for so long and because he's going to do a couple of things that John clearly has problems with, we can assume that he has tenure. There's a section, some of your work was so riveting I couldn't put it down. Mr. Kent said, I was quite impressed with your last assignment for the most part. We don't know who he's talking to. In the previous section or the section after, we can only assume that he's talking to Jasper. And if such is the case, why would he say that and then give him a failing grade? He's either talking to somebody else or he's being intentionally deceptive or facetious. So, again, a failing grade after all that work. Jasper spends the rest of the section just whinging on about another failing grade, and he had just turned in another assignment and there was a failing grade. We don't even know what class this is. We can assume that it's because Jasper essentially says, let's see, class he hated not because of the subject but because of the teacher. We can assume that it's probably in his major of journalism. He just spends the rest of the section whinging on about this failing grade. Missy Ryder, who will show up again. Mr. Kent then looked at the attractive Missy Ryder. He smiled at her and gave her a wink. That's a run-on sentence. There should be a period somewhere in there if there isn't. But that's really the only thing in this. That's really the section. So, what have we found out about Jasper today? He is someone who has no idea of what a relationship actually is. He whinges on about a teacher who apparently doesn't like how he looks because the dean is pissed because he wears casual jeans and a casual shirt or something. There's no real other reason for John to describe him like this. We don't really know anything more about the class itself. We don't know why he's getting a failing grade. And John is essentially trying to paint Mr. Kent as essentially out to get everyone who's not the pretty girl in class, completely removing from potential context that these girls are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing and actually doing the work. I'm going to be writing up essentially a kind of what Hannah did in the previous section with Mariette, with Mr. Kent in the next section. I'll probably post it on Morgalla Sucks on the Facebook page around the same time that I do next week's actual Wrench Reads. But here's the rant that I wanted to go into today, specifically. Mr. Kent is a professor at a community college. There are two things that John has essentially implied of Mr. Kent that would get you fired if you were in academia. For one thing, teacher and student relationships are almost never kept secret, and if you have one, you're out the door. You're gone. That's just how it is. It's a disgrace to the student, to the teacher, and giving academically dishonest grades, like John is implying, like, oh, the pretty girls in class get the good grades where everyone else fails, is grounds to fire almost anyone. And even if we don't assume that Mr. Kent has tenure, this would have gotten him kicked out like almost instantly. Because the dean and the teachers and the faculty would listen to students who would probably have the evidence if Jasper actually had the evidence. I'm going to make that mistake quite a few times, I can tell you that. If you have the evidence against somebody who's actually being incredibly academically dishonest, like Mr. Kent is being, you take it before the review board, the board reviews him, and he's gone. That's it. But John would know this if he actually paid attention to anything in the community college, or actually did some digging as to how community colleges work. So, even if he has tenure, this would have marred his reputation to a point that no one would take the class. And if he was the only person to offer this class, they would make someone else teach it. To give essentially the students an option to get out of his class. Yes, he may not have to leave if he has tenure, but they will work around him if they have to. So, there's two possibilities here. One, Mr. Kent is this incredibly academically dishonest, tenured or not, who has active relationships with all of these different students for a grade. Or two, the more likely one in my opinion, Jasper just sucks as a student. And we'll get more into that next week. So I hope you enjoyed this reading, and I can't wait till next week because we really get into some of the good stuff when it comes to Jasper, in my opinion. Again, there's a couple of links in the info bar. Go ahead and take a look at those. But until next time, folks, na zdlorano, na zdrowie. Peace.